Welcome everybody to another episode of the Kitty Games Podcast here on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. I am Josh Beiser, and joining me, indie developer from Casual Game Studio, Joshua Reyes. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Josh. How you doing this week? I have been
Busy.
busy. Same here. I've been super busy. I fell down the OpenGPT rabbit hole. Um, we're not going to get into that right now because it is a huge rabbit hole. But yeah, I've been messing with that, and then a lot of Unreal Engine 5. And how you been, my man?
I've been trying to keep busy, or I have been busy with reaching out to libraries, working on the book, and trying to get the title or the front cover for the other book all finalized.
That's right.
So people on the Discord have been enjoying like the concept growing or like the last week.
Definitely. Organic growth, man.
On the positive side, I have officially settled on the title, so it's going to be Game Design Deep Dive, Digital and Collectible Card Games. Or, I'm sorry, Trading and Collectible Card Games for that SEO, which is always very important, as we talked about last week.
That's right. Definitely, Josh.
And I guess as a really good segue into our topic, of course, the book I'm writing is going to be all on RPGs. So, tabletop, and of course, CRPG, JRPG, oldie. It turns out there's a lot more letters with RPGs than I originally thought. So, the book has ballooned far more than I originally realized it would be.
I was a little surprised, yeah, when the wife was reading me with the book titles, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's gonna have to be a mouthful. There's nothing you can do to condense it because it's already condensed.
Yeah. So it's going to be on all the RPGs and all the designs, which, again, it won't be that large of a book. I'm at like 25,000 words. I haven't gotten to like the heavy design stuff yet, so it will be just as long as an RPG. So that's good. An 80 to 100 hour long book. Perfect.
There you go. Perfect, Josh.
But
yeah, hardback edition.
Oh, yes. One little bit of fun thing that Josh suggested I think could be great for the channel would be having like an indie game of the month club, where we kind of pick a game to play, and then maybe for like the last episode of the month, or maybe for like a special recording, we talk about the game, what are our thoughts on it, designs, that kind of thing. So, if that is something that people would be interested in doing, let us know in the comments down below. And as soon as I'm done with this book, I can start putting things together, maybe have it as like a vote for the Patreon as well.
Definitely.
But to our main topic this week, that is going to be talking about the recent Dungeons and Dragons, kind of another great example of how to like torpedo a brand in speed run fashion, which is very timeless. I think AGDQ is going on this week as well. So
perfect timing.
This actually leads into a larger topic I want to discuss here as well when it comes to custom ownership over content with games, whether it's mods or either like partial or full conversion, kind of custom content. Because it's something that has really, I think a lot of people may not realize how much it's changed over the past like 20 years, maybe give or take. But
definitely.
To the main point, for those of you who missed the news, Dungeons and Dragons for a long time has operated under kind of like this open agreement that if you create a custom campaign or you create custom characters or anything within the kind of overall Dungeons and Dragons brand, they're perfectly fine with that. Like, they will not ask for any money. They're not going to come after you if you want to host your own special D&D tournament or D&D matches, or even you get paid to do, like, let's say you write your own custom module. And it's been one of the major ways, just like with what we'll talk about later in this episode, that the game has grown beyond its initial circles. It's become a great template for people to do their own custom work. Again, one of the most quintessential examples of this would be Critical Role, the hit Twitch D&D show that basically started because voice actors wanted to play D&D in their own custom campaign, and it blew up like nobody's business. Cut to this week, of course, and Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro have announced that they are going to revise this so that, well, the original version, again, like, there's been a lot of drawing over the last 3 to 4 days, but the original version was going to be that, well, we're not going to, or we're going to require to take certain amounts of money off of your custom content. Anything that you make that earns a profit, we want a cut of that.
Yeah,
And
so it's 7,500K, and they want, Josh, not just, they want 25%.
mm-hmm.
A
and
massive amount.
and don't forget, things can change.
This
You
can
know,
change at any time.
oh wait, they have to. I remember they said they have to give it like 30 days. Like they'll give you a 30-day warning under the kindness of their heart,
Yes.
and then they can do whatever they want. And hey, Star and Amanda in chat.
Welcome, welcome.
So, as we were saying, this went over again completely without drama. Everyone agreed to it. There was nothing wrong. But that was in fantasy world. In the real world, it has led to, quite frankly, just like a complete open revolt of Dungeons and Dragons, Hasbro, and Wizards of the Coast. And Wizards of the Coast, I think they're also suffering from magic drama as well, which that will probably be for another topic in the near future. So, as we're recording this on the 14th of January, and the story is still being developed, it sounds like they have rescinded some of it, but we haven't really gotten like the, hey, it's all clear, everyone is happy kind of alert yet. So, I am definitely not a D&D player. Have you dabbled in Dungeons & Dragons?
I have not dabbled at all. Actually, the only Dungeons and Dragons I played like one MMO based off of it, based off the OGL license. That was about it. But yeah, not much. But the overall thing about the licensing is very important, and there's a lot that we need to take away from this one for sure.
Mm-hmm. And Dungeons and Dragons, again, like for a long time, they have licensed that property like nobody's business. Like this was pretty much
Wild.
like the pre-Marvel, when Marvel had like their trouble, their bankruptcy in the 90s, and they were just, giving it all away. Dungeons and Dragons was very open. Again, most famously, Interplay first bought the license to make D&D games, and that led to, of course, Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter Nights, what was it, Temple of Elemental Evil. Again, like, just any of the major D&D RPGs in the 90s and early 2000s came from that agreement. And, of course, there were console games. I think there was, Forgotten Realms or something like that. That was more of a hack and slash. You mentioned, of course, Dungeons & Dragons Online. It came out during kind of like peak MMO gold rush in the mid 2000s.
Best times to play MMOs.
And as you were saying about this this being a very big deal, it's kind of one of just many examples of how companies are really trying to kind of put a stranglehold on customized or user-generated content. Which is, again, like, very apt to what I was doing with the Game of the Year list. Because I just did my best shooters. I think it was last week or the week before. The Game of the Year list has turned into, like, an all-month affair at the rate that I'm going. But two of the games on that list came from GZ Doom full mod or full conversion mods. And the modding scene of any game has been one of the more, I think, important or appreciated aspects of PC gaming. This idea that I can take my favorite game, my favorite shooter, RPG, whatever, and make stuff with it. And I don't need to worry about lawyers banging on my door because I decided to make, what was it? There's that Chex FPS game from back in the day. They made like a Chex branding Doom.
I've been trying to find that. If anybody listening has that on CD, please, within the sleeve, let me know.
And don't forget, of course, about Skyrim. Skyrim would not be anywhere near the game it would have been today if it didn't have access to the Nexus to just basically saying, just do whatever you want. And again, I think it's also very applicable because if you all remember, Bethesda tried to monetize its mods at one point. They were going to offer paid mods, and again, it was like that kind of Pandora's Box opening for Bethesda that they had to walk back on it.
So, speaking about the Pandora's box, and I think what's really important here is what actually happens when we go forward, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I wish we knew officially today what they were going to do, so that way we could, speak in each direction correctly. But hopefully, they end up rescinding this because if they don't, and it's going to lead to more of this, right? And like we're just seeing this more and more. Like
Mm-hmm.
more companies are trying to do this. Fortnite was just leaked that they're going to have a build mode, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of other implications where it can affect. So, for example, if we get into games of like Fortnite, for example, with content creation, so they're going to allow level building. So for sure, from there, they're going to extrapolate and take that to allow players to create their own content and then monetize from that for sure. That is definitely on the table and will be done. And so if everything is heading that direction, then we need to have laws in place, and we need to have this, and we need also have, companies have to run in good faith, right? I mean, like you were talking about earlier, this was like a speed run to destroy their
Mm-hmm.
goodwill. They had like 20 years of hey, use our stuff. This is you do whatever. We made this amazing thing. And like you were saying, so many games would not exist if it was for not for that. I was explaining to my wife, I was like, Dungeons and Dragons is like in every like almost RPG, like and you can find facets of it everywhere. Or like if it didn't come from there, it came originally from there in some other source. And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, so definitely like taking this kind of acts where they can change it at any time. They can revoke your license at any time. They want 25%. Of course, this is if you're making over 750,000, and you may say, "Oh, well, I'm not making 750,000 right now." But 25% of 750,000 is what? Who's quick at math? Anyone in chat? That's a
Not
lot of
me.
money. Yeah, and I mean,
And again, they can change that at
they
any
could
time.
change it. They could change it to 100%. They could change it. They could change it. You know what? Just
Every
however they
hundred
want
thousand
to.
dollars or every
Exactly.
50,000.
Exactly. Just like Pachinko it out, you know?
Yep. And what you were saying about with Fortnite is again like the very much same thing we're seeing with Roblox and the controversy surrounding that. This idea that
Oh, I missed that?
yeah, like Roblox, there's a lot of discussions about like how people are being like manipulated in terms of like making content for it, how they're actually earning money, and of
Oh,
course how the
yes.
games are being shown to people. And
That's one of the parts I was trying to get into with the
mhm,
Fortnite is I feel that people will be victimized in this process because you're basically having people create content for you that they then own and they can sell, right? And you get and they're like, "Map, you can get nothing." And so like that's one of the dangers that all these modding, because the games that have these moddings with these types of restrictions will create, and that's a terrible type of situation to be in.
mhm. And again, like to the first one I was discussing, like this was not the case 20 years ago, maybe even more than that. When we look at kind of the modding scene of the 90s into the 2000s, developers were just pretty much they viewed mods as kind of like whatever. If someone wants mod Mario into StarCraft or, have Castlevania in Doom, who the heck cares? Do what you want as long as you're not selling it. As long as you're not, saying that we made this. Who cares? And the 90s into that 2000s period was very much like this huge era of custom
Explosive.
created mods or custom created content. Just off the top of my head, this is the era that gave us both tower defense, MOBAs. Don't forget about all the Half Life mods. What was it like? Action Half Life. Did Team
Half-Life.
Fortress start as a mod, or was that a? I keep forgetting if Team Fortress was a mod or not.
It was a mod. It
Okay.
was a mod. I hope I'm not wrong, but I believe it was a mod.
Yep. All the custom content for StarCraft, Warcraft, and this was where a lot of kind of like what we like the up and coming developers or the ones that become very established over the last 15 years. There's a good portion of them who got started doing mods.
Yes.
Who
Yes.
they just use it as either like a way to either as an entry level to game development, or they may have made something fantastic that blew up.
Yeah, like literally back in the day, this was before we had like Unity and Unreal, things like that. Modding was kind of one of the only accessible ways to get into game development, right? And so that was all we had. All we could do was mod a game, do something with Doom, make it a go-kart race game inside of Doom, work on the AI. Like one of my favorite things about during Quake was the AI bots that we would work on. That was stuff was amazing using fuzzy AI logic and stuff. Really cool stuff. And just in a shooter, it was like having a pre-Unreal or a pre-Unity that you really had to crack and hack into. But being open and allowing us to do that. I mean, these games are still alive to this day. I follow on Twitter. I follow like so many level designers who just do level design in Quake because I love the aesthetics of it, right? And like like the community is so big, and so like they still live on. Half-Life, like you mentioned, Josh, all the other previous ones, and it leads to the longevity of the game. And the worst part you can do is like, after 20 years of goodwill and allowing people to create amazing creations and amazing products and experiences and various facets using that, and then to take that away, right, to change it and just to totally speedrun and destroy it, I think it's bad. Hopefully, again, back to my previous point, that they do rescind it and that this will just be more of an overall discussion of like owning content creation and stuff like that. What's the future looking like on that?
And what you said was a really good point I didn't think about with regards to the pre-Unity, kind of public game engine era. It is something, again, that for a lot of like younger people or people who got in the video game industry in like the 2010s, they never had to live in a period where there was no public game engines. Again, the idea of creating a video game has become so much more open and transparent in the past 13 years than it was for 30 years prior to that. And a lot of that came from the growth and the more accessibility or the approachability of these game engines. And like you said, in the 90s and early 2000s, there was nothing. If you were lucky enough that your game came with an SDK, that was like the golden ticket for a developer. But if it didn't, you're screwed. Like, you were not going to be making a game unless you were super hardcore programmer. And like you said, like a lot of early programmers really got, they sharpened their teeth on using mods and either full or partial conversions for their favorite games.
For sure. And hey, Armus, welcome.
So, with that point, like when we look at kind of how the modding scene or what custom content brings to a game, it doesn't, like, I think, again, like, this is where we get to, like, what a lot of people discuss about online with, like, the greed factor versus the brand factor. That the companies who are trying to force the money out of it, it always comes at the cost of the brand. Yes. What partial, full, custom content, whatever, brings to a game, it brings brand recognition, and it brings, as you said, interest. It keeps these games in the limelight far longer than they would have done otherwise. And it's very much in that same vein of why a lot of developers like live service. That, a traditional or a game 20, 30 years ago, you release it, it's done. Maybe you release a DLC or an expansion, maybe you fix bugs, it's done, goodbye, it will disappear from the ether in maybe 6 months. Today, or with these games like Skyrim, like Warcraft, and so on, you can have people still playing them for months, if not years, after their release. Again, look at the modding scene for Doom. Look at the GC Doom scene. There are people still making games. Like, it is not dying. And I think that's, again, why this is so important. Like, these games are still being supported. They are fans who are keeping these games alive. And it's keeping the interest in that brand. Would Dungeons & Dragons be as big as it was if
No.
they just said, you know what, no custom content. You have to license everything directly through us.
Was literally about to say that they would not be where they were today. I think one of the original creators who helped with the OGL license, he tweeted out, "This is what saved the company."
Mm-hmm.
So basically, that going open source or the OGL license allowed him to save the company. And now that if they're now just theoretically, if you were to go back on that, that would theoretically, and
Mm-hmm.
not end well for them.
Yeah.
Through the backlash, it looks like no one's taking it very well at all because I think one point that we didn't mention is that people's livelihoods, they depend on this. And if you were like, hey, so you've been using this thing for a while now, I need 25% of what you've been making off of that. And it's going to change. I don't know. But, like that is not very good for community building.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we could certainly tie this into like kind of like YouTube and Twitch in terms of how much of a stranglehold they have on content creators.
Yeah.
But that's another topic, and I know YouTube's algorithm is like hovering over the nuke button right now as we're talking. And yeah, like it's one of those decisions that it does not help creators. It is not meant for the consumer. It's not meant for you and I. It is meant for shareholders.
Yep, that's
and this is again that larger discussion about why are so many developers trying to kill or trying to monetize custom content. And I think again the answer, of course, is money. Is the idea that again, when we look over the past 20, 25 years, games like League of Legends, Dota, and so on, the creators, again, like the original developers, they didn't see any money in that. They were just the canvas for someone to then create something amazing. And studios, again, they want that money. They don't want you to be making hand over fist money making the next Dota. They want that money. They want to be say, oh yeah, look, this came from us. It didn't come from these people. It came from our game.
Yeah. And speaking of the money, I'm looking at the stock price right now. It's up 0.21%.
Oh, good. That was definitely worth, all the drama right there.
Right. Definitely speed running, burning down your company for that.
Mm-hmm.
0.2.
And there's definitely a greater discussion about the economic side of this, which I am definitely not an economist. This is, way out of my wheelhouse. The idea that for a lot of these companies that are, publicly traded, that they have to keep bringing in money. They have to keep the shareholders happy. Yeah. But the thing is, when it comes to kind of video game and this kind of entertainment content, you can't do that. There is a point where the well is tapped out, and you have to, again, kind of be happy with the fact that, a game sold 2 million copies, 800,000, whatever, and you can't force more people. You can't force more money out of it. Because, again, the beauty about the game industry is that there is always another game to be played. And another very, I think, stark realization for Wizards of the Coast and their shareholders is that there's other tabletop games. There's other tabletop platforms. And this is, again, like that same issue that Blizzard ran into with Diablo.
I feel like they didn't know that there was other ones out. They thought there was only one. And it's like, no, there's like 2 or 3 or 4 other like really good ones that are better than yours actually right now.
Yeah. And like we've said, when it comes to brand recognition, people will stick with the brands that they know and they trust.
Yeah.
Until that brand betrays them. And then they're going to realize, hey, all those issues and problems I have with your thing, this guy over here has none of that. And it's cheaper and it's easier. So why should I ever go back to you? And as I was saying with Blizzard, this is what led to Path of Exile blowing up. People were like, Diablo 3 is horrible. What did they do with the game? And Path of Exile was like, hey, you want a Diablo experience? Here I am. I'm better and I'm free. So, what's stopping you?
I think we were talking about this on one of the last podcasts about the lack of brand allegiance now that
Hmm.
consumers have. They're not going to stick by, they're not going to stick by Wizards of the Coast and support them and be like, oh, they're making the decision because it's great. They know we're being screwed over. Blizzard, same thing. So like people will move on and they're because there's other stuff to play. So
Hmm.
they can easily speak with their pocketbooks and they're speaking with their pocketbooks on droves. I saw so many cancellations. I'm canceling, and I mean, it was just wow,
Hmm.
a ton of negative. Even if this was like they don't do it. Even if they don't do it, right? This document was leaked, and now your diehard fan base is aware that this was your intent. And regardless of the fact that we do know there are board holders and we do know that, how we're aware of these things, but you have an open license that you've been running for 20 years, and then you're deciding we're going to reach into your pocketbooks for our benefit, and that's it. And
Hmm.
so that's, yeah, again, speed run to the end of the company there.
And what you just said there is very important. The consumer knows now that that was on the table. Yes, it may have been removed today. It's still in, they now know that was one of their options
Yeah,
in the back of their heads.
yeah.
So what's to stop them from maybe trying this again in a year, in
Mhm.
6 months, when all the hubbub has calmed down? Maybe they'll name it another, they'll like give it another name or another spin.
Nicer name, give it a little spin,
Mm-hmm.
remove like one facet, like, oh, it's not 25%, it's only 18%.
Mm-hmm.
And and like we can only revoke it if you dispute it or something, and just change one or two things and then it'll go through. And that's what I'm worried about. I'm worried that
Yep.
the next time they're just gonna roll it through.
And again, like to your point about the consumers voting with their wallets, this is, I think, like not so much I think a good example, but it's kind of like a positive, is that consumers these days have options. And I think a lot of companies are learning the hard way that
Yeah.
while you have fan support, you're also kind of held hostage by it. Like gone are the days where a company can just say, you know what, we're just going to raise the price by $50, or we're going to take all this away. What are they going to do about it? Today, you know what they can do about it? They can make thousands and thousands of tweets. They can make hundreds and thousands of videos and streams. People can hear about this within minutes of these kinds of announcements. And when the consumer knows that something is going wrong or they don't like it, again, guess what? There are options. And if there aren't any options right now, guess what? There's a competitor out there smelling blood in the water
Right.
going,
Exactly.
hey, they just screwed up and pissed off 500,000 of their fans. What can we do? What can we make right now as an announcement to get somewhere bring all those people over to us? And it's a very interesting counterpoint. It's kind of what we saw with the whole Epic Games, Steam war. That Epic was trying to be the next Steam, and they were trying to push it really heavily, and then nothing happened out of it. And, Steam definitely made some updates and still not perfect, but it kind of forced Steam to change, and then Epic just like kind of they took the ball, they fumbled it, and then they just like kind of like went off the field and did something else.
Yeah, they had other things to do
Mm-hmm.
for
And
sure.
I guess to the point about Fortnite and about again like custom content, it is a very murky issue. I think this is one of those aspects of game design, game development that we really haven't, put a official label, or we haven't really decided on. Because if you look at again on PC, there are tons of custom content and not exactly legal but morally gray editors out there. Again, if you look at the Mario scene or the Kaizo Mario, they
Yeah.
have their own software, which I'm not going to be mentioning here for very obvious reasons, that they've been using to easily, or I should say easily, make ROM hacks for the various Mario games. these games aren't being sold. No one is trying. No one's going to confuse some crazy Kaizo mod for the latest game from Nintendo. But what does that mean in terms of, you know, the ownership of it, or like where does it stick? Because some of these Kaizo mods, as we've seen from AGDQ, are very high production value. They are very high quality mods that, admittedly, I would say they could be sold, or they do deserve some kind of kickback or recognition from it. But as we all know, the millisecond someone tries to put a price tag on a Mario mod, Nintendo is coming, with the
Yeah.
four horsemen of the apocalypse on you.
Bro, the biggest lawyer team you've ever seen, the Nintendo lawyer team. Is, um, yeah, like it gets really murky. And one point I'm kind of worried about here is that, okay, so like Fortnite is if you launched up Epic's launcher, you see there's an Unreal tab, and you can do like learn Unreal, and there's a whole bunch of stuff, and they have some courses that are like based around Fortnite, and like basically getting people to create content for your game for free. Um, I don't know what to call that, Josh, but we need a name for that. But yeah, like like also when you're creating content in another engine, right? Like this is a game design, so like okay, game design. Like we study the art and science of game design, and when you're using like a proprietary like thing such as Mario Maker or something like that, what you might be learning, you might be just taking away maybe level design skills and stuff like that. But like the actual other stuff, like as in working in an actual level editor, working in a real thing, that is not going to teach you anything. So like maybe some of the time would be well spent instead learning Unity or learning Unreal, trying it out in Godot. I think would recommend that instead. If you are a person who feels like, okay, I want to mod this game or something, maybe instead working on your own game, because I think a lot of companies are going to be looking at this, watching which direction that Hasbro goes in. And if they go that route, they're going to be like, well, we're going to do it too. And if they don't, they're going to wait it out, and they're going to try it again, and just change it about. But they're going to push something like this through. Like I don't feel that because that was just like their heaviest bargain. They definitely have lighter bargains that they whipped up just in case to satiate their audience. And but yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and it actually, as you were saying, it brings up a point about like RPG Maker, because I was looking into it, and they're actually releasing another version of it this year. And I don't know this all the top of my head. Maybe you do, or someone in chat. Do you get, or like, do they get like a kickback, or do you have to pay them, like if you release a game using RPG Maker or not?
Let me see.
Because again, I know Unity has their percent. Unreal obviously has what was like 7 or 8% from Unreal now. But I don't know about RPG Maker.
RPG as of, let me see. I'm not seeing any updates, and it looks like it is free. Yeah, there are no additional fees. You just need to purchase RPG Maker, just the software that you actually have to purchase, and then that's the license. So that would actually be, that's not really too bad.
That's actually quite interesting, because I was writing about this in the book this past week, that a lot of developers look down on RPG Maker for, again, the idea of why make a little game in RPG Maker when you can learn a Unity or an Unreal or whatever.
Right.
But the counterpoint is that it is a tool that provides pretty much almost like all the assets, it basically is like that one-stop shop of like a canvas and all the art tools.
Like your entire gameplay framework is there for you. Like that's the stuff that we were talking about in a previous episode that will stump a developer for like years. Like they're just trying to figure out how the save game state works, how a menu works. All that stuff is there for you. You have an amazing gameplay framework, and there's no fees. So I have a lot more respect now for RPG Maker after learning that. And it's really smart because you just purchase your software and you have the license. And instead of Unity I don't even know what they I think they recently raised it too, and Unreal's lowered it. Unreal lowered it, and Unity raised it.
Yeah. And like we've said, it provides an outlet to make this content. And I think this kind of gets at another interesting point. Like when we look at stuff like Epic, like Blizzard, and the Wizards of the Coast, this idea that I just wonder, are they assuming people are going to make content for it? Like they're assuming that. I think this kind of is that same discussion about esports, like developers trying to force a game into an esport. That if you're trying to force people to create content for you, and then in return get that kickback, get that royalty on it, it's not going to happen. Because again, like we looked at this, or we saw this with Skyrim, that the second Bethesda said, what if we have, custom, premium mods? The entire Nexus game site just, it exploded for like 24 hours. And I think this is another point, and we'll get to Mojo's question in chat after this. But here's another big point. When we talk about partial, full, or mods along these lines, there is a lot of legal loopholes and legal discussions that come into ownership. What if and this is one of the things I remember reading about on the Nexus Games, what if a very popular mod takes off, but it was made up of 3 smaller mods? Or what if that mod is owned, person A did the art, person B did the voice acting, person C did the scripting? Who gets the ownership of that? Who gets the money? And even with stuff, again, like, what like Epic and Activision and D&D are trying to do is just say, well, we get it all. Whatever you make, why is it yours? It's mine. And again, it's that issue of who would want to do something like that.
Right. I was looking at that Fortnite build, our custom level editor build thing. I'm like, why would I make content for them? Like they got plenty of level designers that they could do their own stuff, and they're trying to outsource it. So Mojo's, I got up the data for Mojo here. So for Unity, after your first million, you have to pay 5% royalty fees. Okay. And for Unreal, you pay 5% above the first million in gross revenue. And payments are due 45 days after the close of each calendar quarter. So yeah, it depends on the engine, whether you need to pay royalties or not. Because like Josh said earlier, about RPG Maker is that it contains all the very important facets of game development, the tedious, laborious parts, such as the gameplay framework, which again, I go over a lot about the menus, the UI, the save game states, all the basic things, sliders, all the basic things that need to be in there, and they're already there for you. And so when you're there in RPG Maker, you're focusing on creative, right? You're designing actually and creating the game, creating a narrative, doing cool stuff, which is more important in a game because no one really cares that your menu isn't your game. Your menu needs to work in the game, right? All that stuff needs to work. So if you're spending all your time getting those basics done, you're not going to get a very good game out there. So any way you have to get past those very tedious, laborious aspects of game development, you should take them. And so, yeah, I mean, I myself used to look down at RPG Maker, but now I'm seeing it in a bit different light. I think that people who are using it were smart about the license fees and also the massive gameplay framework that it does have in that respect.
And I think another, very understated or not really talked about benefit is that it allows someone who, let's say, is just a storyteller, who is just someone who wants to make a very unique story, who is not going to become a UI designer, who has no skill in programming. They can write and do that amazing story in RPG Maker, and turn into something else. Look at something like To the Moon. I was just writing about that in the book. Like, To the Moon was built off of RPG Maker, it has no combat whatsoever. Like, it is not an RPG, but it is one of the most emotionally charged games to come out in the past in the 2010s. And
Yeah,
could they have made that in another engine? Maybe. Would it have been as easy to have been made or as quickly have been made?
no,
Definitely not.
not
Because again,
definitely
like you can
not.
just hit that button and it just magically you hit the button on RPG Maker, it just translates it all to Unreal, makes it all
Exactly.
3D 4K for you, and then you just hit the other button and just ships it.
It ships it, and then there's the DLC button,
Mm-hmm.
the
Fishing mini
gotcha button,
game, yep.
the mini game, fishing mini game button. So it's all easy now.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, like I guess here's a question for you, and this is also for chat as well. Do you think paid mods, and we're not talking about like taking a partial or full conversion mod and then selling it like its own thing. We're talking about inside a game itself. Do you think the idea of paid mods will ever catch on, or do you think that is such like counter oppose or counterintuitive to what modding is that no one would ever support something like that?
No, I unfortunately I think people are gonna buy in, and as soon as like the Fortnite
Mm-hmm.
level content creator comes out, people are gonna go to that in droves, and I just I don't see it. I don't see that there's going to be a big enough backlash,
Mm-hmm.
and then the really big fish in the sea are just going to keep going forward. They got enough money and enough cash, and they can just plow through and push their agenda through. So I think that if that leaked document was it might not even have been their worst version. It might have been a nicer version. We don't know. And,
Mm-hmm.
if that leaked document is any indication, they're not the only company thinking that, right? Like they're aware that there is a sea change going on, and that there is money to be made in created content that they don't have to pay for, and then that they suddenly own. That's free money, basically, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's companies definitely looking into it. I unfortunately, unless gamers really stand up and fight with their wallets, that's the only way it will be stopped. But I think that eventually we will be looking at like majority of content like that. Now there's a lot, but that doesn't mean that's why we have Josh here for the indie game scene. He'll show you all the other the games that are good and exactly should be played. So, I mean, other good games are still going to be made. It's just like that thing, I think, is going to become more prevalent. It's just like how when Genshin Impact came out, or Diablo Immortal, more likely Diablo Immortal, how little pushback. I felt like people were just like, yeah, we got to pay a lot of money
Mm-hmm.
for every day, for everything, and for the gear and whatever. And no one, I mean, I was like, I remember the horse armors. Like, what happened to that vigor? And then the fight that we had, and now we're just, yeah, that's gaming.
I again like the chaos energy in me wants to see like when Bethesda announces the next Sky or next Elder Scrolls game, if they're going to do horse armor again,
Yeah,
and
they
what the
are. They have
reception.
to. I have to. We'll do. They're gonna do like an announcement. We should live stream that, and then
Mm-hmm.
we'll have like a Patreon thing, and we'll.
Yeah, and it is something that people. Oh, and if you think like the horse armor is bad, you should look at like forum discussions on mobile games and people argue about whether it's free to play or not, because that is another just painful loophole. They give you a 10 pull every month. Why are you complaining about the game being pay to win? Or you can unlock this in 400 days. Why are you complaining, you poor person? Oh, man. Let's see, Mojo,
Good
you.
wallet.
Yeah, like to Mojo's comment there. For I know with Unreal, they and again I think as you said with Unity, like you have to of course. Well, Unreal is free, like it is 100% free right
Yeah,
now,
it's
right?
pretty. Yeah.
Unity, I do they still charge you like for like a developer's
There
license?
is, yeah. Okay. So there's a free tier, and then
Yes.
they have free tier, and then they have a developer's license, and that offers like additional support. You're in like some of their little things
Hmm.
that they offer, some little additional like discounts on assets and stuff like that. So they try and make it a little worth it. The Unity's and it's per seat for Unity. So unlike Unreal, it's just if you happen to make that much money, then they're like, hey, give us a little bit of the money because you made
Yeah.
money. But Unity, no, they do have perpetual
Hmm.
yearly license, and I think it was the last time I used it, it was like about 120 a year. So
Yeah. And yeah, like too, as we were saying earlier, like at the end, actual like making money off of your games, they'll come after you once you've hit certain tiers of it.
yes,
But
yes,
again, like for a lot of indie developers, and why Epic was so attractive is that the engine was free, and if they're not going to charge you, until you make your first million,
million.
you know, for a lot of the indie devs watching this, I hate to be mean, but I don't think they're making, their first million. I'm
Yeah,
sure you're making 8 million,
yeah.
on your first indie game.
Yeah, just, I'm already on my fourth million right now.
Have you gotten
So
your private island yet? Have you gotten that reserved?
yeah, right here.
There you go. And yet, like, one of the things that we've learned, you brought up Mario Maker earlier, and I think this is one of those points I've been thinking about a lot over the last decade, is that I want to see more free software that allows people to create games or create game design. So I want someone to be able to download something and say, you know what, I want to make a 2D platformer. I want to, I don't care about programming. I don't care about art. I would love, and I would say this, like, if Nintendo was smart, they would release Mario Maker on the PC, and that
Oh,
would bring in, like, hand over fist money from all the
oh,
people who would want to make a platformer like this. I mean, we have, the Mega Man Maker that is kind of like somewhat underground, but not really. People, I've heard someone has made a. I'm going to tongue tie myself here. A Metroidvania Mega Man, or a Mega Man Metroidvania. If you can say that 10 times fast.
wow! I gotta find that one.
And again, like, what makes these things so popular is that they keep these brands alive, and they also, keep people wanting to look at this stuff. It brings people. It builds and brings communities together.
Yeah, it's super important, man. Like you talked about the community aspect. Like I said, I follow level designers in Quake and Doom, and it's still it's more. I swear it's bigger than the scene was back then. Just because we have so much more access to it now. I mean, you can tweet about it, you can get it out there. I mean, before you would have to like do your level and then like upload it, and then hopefully maybe someone got on their dial up and then went across it and found your map that you didn't. And now you can
Hmm.
just tweet it out with video, and you're like, boom, here's this level. I mean, it's awesome, and the community is massive, and they're so passionate about it. So I mean, Quake still to this day is still going. Doom still to this day, and I don't think if you wouldn't allowed mods in those games, I don't think they'd be where they would be today at all. Like, not even
Yeah.
close. Not even close.
And look at something as simple as the Steam Workshop. I think it's another aspect that a lot of people take for granted
Yeah.
in terms of what Steam has done. For every one of us who grew up in the 90s and 2000s, in order to get a mod to a game, we would have to go to a random website, and everyone remembers having to download them from File Planet, and
Yeah.
go to like 3 different portals and mirrors, and maybe download the file, and hopefully it doesn't have
When
a
you can,
virus
man.
on it. Oh,
When you can.
yeah. And with Steam, it's just literally, here's all the mods.
Yep.
Hit a button, it's integrated into the game. Hit the button again, you take it out of your game. I mean, again, it's one of those things that for a lot of people, they're just like, it's so commonplace. But for developers over the last 20, 30 years, like, the Steam Workshop is just like this miracle. And yeah, Greenlight is no longer available. It has been replaced with Steam Direct, right? Or am I mixing up?
Yes, you just simply you fill out some forms, you pay a fee,
$100.
$100, and then there you go. Your page has to be reviewed and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. But I'm sure everybody's seen what makes it to the Steam page, so you can, yeah, just $100 and basically you get your Steam page up.
Mm-hmm. And having, again, like, the easeability, as you were just saying a few minutes ago, of mods and custom content has been a huge growth of these games. And I think a lot of people, again, take for granted just how much keeping these games in their own respective limelights really does matter for these companies. Because when
Yes.
you're going 5, 10, even sometimes longer than that, in terms of a new game release, people can move on to other franchises. Again, like we've said, the era in which there are no other first person shooters being released or no other platformers, that's gone. Your
Yeah,
game
this
sucks, 10 more out this week.
Yeah, this is definitely the era where,
Mm-hmm.
like, again, you just move on, and
Mm-hmm.
if a company burns their goodwill, you can move on, and there's so many other alternatives. So there's no reason to stick around anymore,
Mm-hmm.
and definitely in our ADHD type generation, people have no time to deal with that, and they're just going to move on as soon as they can.
Yeah. And to Silver Tabby's comment, yeah, and that's the thing about tabletop games, that a lot of the joy of tabletop is the people who are actually running it. The game, for a lot of cases, is kind of secondary to the interactions, to the storytelling.
Yeah,
And that is another major aspect that I talk about in my book about the personalization and customization. And that is what custom content brings to these games. It allows someone to play the game exactly how they would like it. Look again at stuff like XCOM. There not only did the XCOM 2 have full mod support, but there are people making mods for the original XCOM. There's, I think it's like Open XCOM or Open GL XCOM, that it's like makes it not only playable on modern machines, thankfully, but there are people who've made total and partial conversion mods for XCOM.
you
And
even mentioned League of Legends.
yeah, I mentioned, I think I mentioned like League of Legends, or the whole MOBA scene
Yeah,
came
yeah,
from a Warcraft 3 mod. A
yeah.
tower defense. You know, everything from Arknights to all the mobile games to, what was it, not Desktop Dungeons, that popular tower defense one. I keep seeing people, there's like 20 different versions of it now. I forget the name of it. But the entire tower defense scene, it was birthed out of a mod for Warcraft 3. I was playing Warcraft 3 mods for tower defenses long before anyone thought to make a game out of that.
Oh man, that sounds cool.
Yeah, and that's another interesting point too. Like, it's again why brand recognition is very valued by companies. That when you become that standard, when you are the number one MMO or you are the number one first person shooter, people will just associate that game or that branding as the entire genre. It's why, again, that when a game like Genshin Impact or Final Fantasy XIV blows up like that, it kind of becomes that black hole that everyone's going to know about, and all the other games are going to be judged by whether you wanted to or not.
Indeed. What's that, Josh?
And yeah, like we were saying earlier, or as you were pointing out at the start, like Dungeons and Dragons is as synonymous with fantasy and role playing as one brand could possibly get. The same way that Magic the Gathering was kind of, that's what we call a TCG.
Yep, yep. It's
And
magic.
guess what? Now we have other CCGs and TCGs. And
There was a time where I was like, I never thought there would be another one, and then all of a sudden, boom, just an explosion of them, amazing quality ones. Yeah, and that's all it takes.
And again, it's part of the reason has been the use of allowing more people to get into game design who can get into this stuff and make it. How many people, again, as we've said, started their game dev careers making a mod in Doom or Quake or Half Life, or who decide to just, play around using something like a tabletop simulator or whatever. And then they either use that and create their own game, or that gave them the inspiration to then make their own game, away from that brand. And when you remove that aspect, it kills a lot of the creativity.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and like one of these aspects is like you were saying, like we're talking about like using Unity or Unreal, and what they offer is they offer this like robust tool set and gameplay frameworks that you don't have to reinvent the wheel for. And Dungeons and Dragons is the same thing. Like all of its rule sets and everything like that. So much stuff is based off of it. And so, could you imagine if I was going to say, yeah, I want to make my own Dungeons and Dragons game, like it, and then but I need to start making my own rule set, and so you would start making all the rule sets, and instead you could just take that and spend your time on the creative aspect of it, right? So it allows you again to design. It's almost like a Unity or Unreal, just because all the framework is there for you already made. So it allows you to focus on the actual stuff that matters, the creative aspects of it, the enjoyment of it.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, with getting out or removing the kind of nitpicky or the foundational stuff, that if you can have an engine that handles menuing and saving and all that very easily, guess what? You can focus on your design. You can focus on your storytelling. And it's as we said last week, that if you can get that foundational, that blueprint stuff out of the way as quickly and as cheaply as possible, it's going to help you when it comes to actually working on your game. That you don't need to worry about your engine, crashing or your saves not working right. You've already gotten that handled 6 months ago or within like 2 to 3 weeks.
Right. And like I said, I got to say it again every show. If you're prototyping, making a game, make sure you do your menu first and then build your game around the menu. So your menu's for operational, and make sure it has sliders and everything. Because if you build it backwards, you're going to be in big trouble. So just another pro tip. Always got to say it, Josh.
And let's see, with Silver Tabby's comment there, the difference between D&D and Pathfinder. Again, like, major companies, they are jockeying between each other, and they're also looking for any weakness or, major issues to kind of take that knife and just stab it in and twist it that little more. And, like, with Call of Duty and Battlefield, like, Battlefield for some time was kind of like the premier, multiplayer-based shooter. It was, what was it, from, like, the mid-2000s into the 2010s. Like, that was it. And then as Call of Duty got a lot more involved, more complicated, with more content, Battlefield did not keep up. I've heard that the latest one, whose name completely escapes me, like, it did not do as well as people were thinking. And this, again, is part of the challenge of brand recognition and why companies have to be a lot more mindful. You can say that, Call of Duty is the best game. All it takes is one bad title, one horrible year, and someone else can go, hey, you like Call of Duty, but you hate all the bad stuff they've done? Look at me. Because they're not going to be looking at those games and those other IPs if the one they love is doing well. Why should someone look at another MMO if they're playing Final Fantasy XIV or peak World of Warcraft? They're not. But look at what has happened with World of Warcraft these days and how they've gone from, again, having millions or tens of millions of subscribers to now they're down to, I think, just around 2 million, maybe even less than that. And really? Final Fantasy is now the number one MMO on the market. And there was a time when
they dropped that low,
Final Fantasy was horrible. That the original release of Final Fantasy XIV, again, was one of the worst games to come out that year.
Yeah.
And they bounced back in such a huge turn.
Yeah. If you ever have time to if you're ever like sitting back and you want to watch some information about game design or like turning something around, watch I think the No Clip documentary on it. And it's like 2 hours long, but it's a lot about saving a game, turning it around, and a lot of production, little insider stuff in there. It's definitely worth a watch. So it's cool.
Yeah. And again, people will flock to the games that are being supported, that they know there's a community around. And if you burn your community, you're going to be left with a game that no one wants to touch. And as we were saying, like, for like the 2022 wrap-up show, Blizzard is kind of on notice at this moment that we don't really know what the future is going to lie for that company. And Diablo 4, I think, is really going to be kind of like this make it or break it
Yeah.
kind of affair. And Overwatch 2, I've heard very little about. Like, it's out, but I am nowhere hearing like the same amount of praise or the same amount of outreach for that game that the original one had.
Indeed, Josh.
And when we see like developers burn through this, and why custom content matters is that you want people to be looking at your game. You want people to know that your game is still out there, that hey, someone made this crazy weird thing that's blowing up. So people are
Yep.
going to check that out. And they're going to check it out, they may buy your game. And then they may make content for it.
Side effect of it is the SEO thing that we always talk about. Like
Mm-hmm.
if there's mods constantly bubbling up here and there constantly, and there's a giant community, you'll always be there in the search. You'll always pop up. So again, just great for longevity of the game in all realms. So
Mm-hmm. And I was going to put in my original thumbnail concept for like Valve and Team Fortress, because I know that Team Fortress has suffered a little bit. Like the original, Polycount pack, when they were allowing creators to earn money off of making content for it. That I've heard in recent years that they either like haven't been doing it as well, or they have been like holding purchases or holding sales. So I don't know how well that's going. But like the original Polycount pack was this huge deal for a lot of modders. This idea that I can create something and not only can it be officially recognized by the studio, but I can earn money off of that. And I wish more studios would go that route. But again, it has to be very transparent, and you can't be cheating or trying to deal with it under the table.
definitely, yeah. I mean, and this is a perfect example. What Wizards did is a perfect example of what not to do. And we all know that like keeping anything open source allows for more collaboration, more
Mm-hmm.
creativity, more things to be made, and then a goodwill, community, longevity of the game. And so going against that is definitely bad and for Wizards of the Coast. Hopefully they rescind it because, like I said, I think this is going to be like a little bit of a bellwether, and also like you said, Diablo 4, and that's definitely going to be telling us where we're going to be heading in that type of space.
Mm-hmm. And what it means, again, for the future of these mega companies is that people are, as we've said, they're far more keen to spot these issues. That if you go after someone these days, and I think it's a very funny thing, like, we're not hearing as much, I think, in recent years about, like, Nintendo going after some of the smaller creators. Like, in the
Uh,
2010s, like, it was, like, almost every, like, 2-3 months. Nintendo, suing for a Pokemon ROM had, Pokemon going for Metroid, and so on. Like, we haven't heard too many of that in like the last like year or two.
yeah, I
I
wonder why that's been. They've kind of chilled out a little bit.
I also wonder if just like the negative PR is getting to them.
Exactly. Because I felt that was building up, and then the people were getting a big resentment toward Nintendo. I can't stream it. I have streaming issues, and so you would see a lot of negative stuff, right, from streamers like, "Hey, I got in trouble for this, and I this and that." And so when everything is being talked about you negatively, I think Nintendo was like, you know what? We have to let people create content with our content and make money off of our content. We can't own everything that they do
Hmm.
because that's it. Just you lose your base, and then they're your base. They're just streaming your game. They're doing everything, and you're attacking them.
Hmm.
So that doesn't work very well.
Yeah. And again, like we've said, like with social media, these stories break out. And on our recent roundtable that I just posted the other day about the influence of streamers and YouTubers on games, a backroom or very shady deal does not stay hidden as long as it did
No,
15-20 years ago.
no, no. It's
And
gonna get leaked.
and when it does, guess what? every news covering streamer and YouTuber is going to make a video about it. And then that video is going to go out on all the social media channels. And within probably 24 hours or less, everyone of that fan base is going to know about it.
Yep.
And it, like, you have to, I think, today, weigh kind of like the public brand face a lot more of your studio. Because, like we said, like with Nintendo is not the only game in town. Nintendo makes great games, but guess what? We have a lot of indie games now. We have a lot of great 2D platformers. If Nintendo decides to piss everyone off, guess what? I can go to all the indie games. I can go, again, like, as we've said, like, even Sony and Microsoft these days are courting more indie developers. So they're getting more diversity on their platforms than they were doing 15 years ago.
Getting all those AAA independent devs.
AAA indies, right there. The point, though, still stands that we have a wealth of games, and you don't need to be held to one studio anymore. Not only are there so many more games, but the competitors are waiting. No matter what genre, no matter what mega franchise there is, I can guarantee there's at least 5 to 10 games who are just waiting for them to screw up. Who are just sitting there going, the second they make this issue or there's that problem, we have a news piece ready, or we'll make a small game, or we'll announce something, and just, ride that marketing wave for as long as we can.
Exactly. Like, just like you were talking about Path of the Exile, they went in, scooped it up. If somebody smells blood in the water, there's someone there. They call that show the Shark Tank for a reason. To Silver Tabby's point, just like I was saying, super fans are the best and the cheapest marketing tool. And so why would you go after them and sue them? You know what I mean? They're literally the best marketing tool you have. We're talking about, like, these companies monetizing content, right? And then here they're getting free content creation, and then they're suing for it. So,
Yep, and to Malwini's point about Nintendo, there's, like, in the 2010s, like, every month we were hearing some story about Nintendo sending a copyright strike. And don't forget about that. They were going to have that, you had to sign up to Nintendo's partner program to become an official Nintendo YouTuber, and then we will allow you to stream and play games on your channel. Again, people, like we said with gamedev, people don't want to jump through hoops, and there is more than enough free alternatives. And, like, to just comment about, like, if there's a crash at the AAA level, I'm not going to feel it. It is not going to hit me at all.
I will not be impacted one bit at all. And I think we called it, like, the AAA malaise or something. I'm not sure what we said, but it's just that's not where we go for creative, good content. It's like, I don't know, what would you call it, Josh? What do you go to AAA for nowadays?
I don't know. Maybe a Nintendo game, but even then, like, I'm not really playing those. Like,
you mentioned that on the last podcast. It's like, but do you want to spend $60 for another Mario game? And I was sitting there thinking, I was like, you know what? I don't think so. Yeah. At this point, I'd rather play something new.
Yeah. And to Silver Tabby's comment, and that's another really good point. When a controversy happens with a major company, like we said, smaller companies can use that to promote, like, heck. For, like, the 5th time, Path of Exile, all they had to say was, we're Diablo, but good. That was their whole marketing thing back in 2014.
Right. So now a company, all they have to do is say, are you tired of the 25% being taken out of your royalties or your profit? We got you. It's free. And then you're like, okay, good. You know what I mean? There's no reason to stick around. And someone was mentioning that they're like, what? How much a part of, like, 80% of the market right now? That's now, and it's currently, right? And that's easily changed.
Yeah. Look at what's happening with Twitter right now. With Twitter doing its slow motion implosion, which, wow, I'm, like, tongue-tying myself, this entire cast. a lot of people did not expect them to have this much trouble. So, in a very like ironic or weird twist, like a lot of the competitors are kind of like left, with their pants down, going like, well, all these issues, but no one was able to really capitalize on it.
Yeah.
But I can guarantee, I think we all know for sure that somebody out there is going, Twitter is weak.
Yeah.
Let's do something. Even if it only has half the functionality of Twitter right now. If they can say, we're Twitter without all the issues, all the drama and problems with Elon Musk, people will flock to that as long as it has, again, like the basic functionality and none of the issues.
Indeed.
And it will be interesting, again, to see what comes of the tabletop scene out of this whole fiasco. Because like we said, like, we're recording this right now kind of like in the middle of it. We don't know where Wizard of the Coast and Hasbro are going to end up, but we do know one thing, like, they have poisoned the well with this comment.
For sure.
And if this does open up the door to other tabletop franchises, like for me, the only other one that I know of is like the Vampire the Masquerade, and that was from playing those games. I am not a huge tabletop person myself, but this opens up that door. And if someone else can come in and say, we are, as good or even better than what D&D can offer you, and we're not going to, charge you for anything, who knows what that will mean in 5 to 10 years from now if that brand now starts being licensed all over the place and blows up like that.
Yeah, the precedent that what's dangerous is the precedent that this will set.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the key takeaways that we should be aware of. So definitely be watching close. I really wish we had what the official was before. I was watching and looking and nothing was popping. I'm sure they're going to wait till Monday. They're going to mull over it and decide which way they want to go. And of course, the best option would be to leave it how it was, because that's the best for everyone. That's where everybody wins. Wizards of the Coast will win that way. So will the consumers. The only people who won't win a ton more would be like board members and stuff like that. But as far as everything else, I think it's okay if a few board members aren't getting, an extra
million
BMW.
Or two. Yeah,
an extra million is not going to hurt.
Yep, and I think
for 4, I mean, that's...
Yeah. And I think is a good point to kind of lead into the end. Before we get to that, any other aspects of this that we didn't touch on?
Let's see here. Just the precedent that it sets. Let's see here. We talked about the license, Fortnite. No, I think we covered it all, Josh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think to kind of wrap things up and to build off what you just said, one of the major lessons, and I think it was Silver Tabby saying this as well, is that the super fans, the people who build kind of equity in the brand, they are your biggest double-edged sword. When you keep them happy, they will support your game again till the sun dies. You piss them off, you try to backstab them, you try to go back on agreement, they will become your worst nightmare. And people like talk about the horror of dealing with shareholders. They don't know the horror of dealing with hundreds of thousands of pissed off fans because you decided to lie or you took away something that they had for free. Because here's the thing, they don't forget it. Like we've said, fans do not forget betrayal. And when it comes to kind of live service games in particular, that if your company ends a game on a good note, those fans will come back. They'll support your next game. You end it because you felt that your game deserves $7 million more a month, or who cares about it? Those people are never coming back, and guess what? They're going to tell all their friends. They're going to let everybody know that you stabbed them in the back. And when that happens, your brand becomes blacklisted. And like we've said, when a brand becomes blacklisted or toxic like that, people aren't going to want to support it. And it's why, as we were saying earlier, that a lot of companies these days, I think, are very much minding their P's and Q's on these matters. Because all it takes is one bad story, and people aren't going to trust that. As I was saying earlier with Roblox, there's a lot of discussion about not only the kind of content that Roblox is not really like authenticating or vetting on the platform, but what they're taking from people who are making these little games, or trying to get them to spend more or make more. That kind of stuff, again, it may not hurt you in the short run, but once it becomes public and kind of attached to your brand, that is going to ruin it. And it can take years. Sometimes it may never. Like, that kind of black stain may never come off your company. I think Riot is another good example. Riot for years has been known as, one of the worst places to work, and so many scandals and lawsuits. Yeah. And they have been improving. But again, it took a lot of black eyes and red marks on their record for that to happen. And for a lot of companies, they're not going to have that time or money. And I think League of Legends, again, that other point. One of the reasons why they managed to survive that is that they were one of the only two major MOBAs. If you didn't want to play a MOBA, you either had Dota or League.
Yeah, Dota.
That was it. Today, we've seen more examples. We're seeing more companies trying to do this stuff. And back to the trading card scene. Again, we have CCGs like Hearthstone, Gwent, Marvel Snap, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Shadowverse. Again, there's more than I can even count right now off the top of my head. When you betray your fan base, people have other options. And sometimes all it takes is for some other company to screw up to give you now that bump. And if you're in that position to take advantage of it, it's like the perfect marketing play. We brought up Fortnite earlier. Again, Fortnite was not the first Battle Royale game. It was not even like the first big name one. But it was the one that captured the popular market, being the most approachable and accessible. And then history was made.
Indeed. Well said, Josh. Couldn't sit better myself, man.
But yeah, I think that does it for me. So anything else from you?
I think that's it. I think we got it.
All right. So I think with that, we will wrap things up for this week's show. We'll have to decide on a topic for next week. So if you guys have any suggestions, let us know in the comments down below.
Yeah, and don't forget, like Josh mentioned at the beginning of the show, we're thinking about the Game of the Month Club. So if you have any ideas or suggestions about that or comments for the next show, please leave those down below. My Twitter handle and my games are down below, Rooster Rampage and Samurai Pig. Please wishlist them. Join the Discord, buy Josh's books, and we will see you. I'll see you next time, Josh.
Yep. We'll be back next Saturday around 5 p.m. ET. Again, my information is up there. Do the liking, subscribing, and commenting. And otherwise, come back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. Have a great weekend, and see you next time.